Hi class, let's talk about newsletter design. In this lesson, I want to talk about the client brief you're going to write, newsletter elements, design style, and decorative elements for your newsletter. So every project you have in this class is going to start with you creating a creative brief, and you will see this again in your other classes. This is a brief that Professor Debbie Davis put together, and we meet and talk about our classes all the time to make sure that you guys are getting the best of everything that we each do. And this is something that she uses in her classes, and I now use in my classes, and others will begin using in their classes if they haven't already, so expect to see this again. But the creative brief is a brief you're going to fill out explaining your intentions for whatever project you're working on, whether it's a design or a social media campaign or a press release. You're going to explain what the point of the thing you're making is. So in this class, for every project you work on, you're going to fill out a creative brief. Now, I have provided for you a content strategy document, a core strategy document that explains audiences for your client and messages for your client. So when you create this creative brief, you need to consult that document because a lot of the questions asked on the creative brief can be answered with the core strategy statement, or you'll select from the core strategy statement. So for example, communications objective, what does the newsletter have to make happen? Well, I've already told you it's an internal newsletter for current clients. So you need to look at that core strategy statement and figure out which audiences could be current clients and what do you want this newsletter to do for them. For target audience, you have names of audiences, the entrepreneur, the techie turned CEO. So I want you to tell me here, what are the target audiences for this internal newsletter? And then for each must-reach audience, explain kind of their concerns. You can get those from the personas. You can get that from the core strategy document. And key messages, again, you're going to get that from the core strategy document, but you need to decide which of those messages are appropriate for an internal newsletter. So this isn't just a copy and paste exercise. You do have to use your brain a little bit. You have to think about what can this newsletter accomplish and who can it accomplish that with. The core strategy document explains the strategy for all audiences, including all messages. Your newsletter cannot be everything. It cannot be the entire core strategy. So you're going to have to decide from that strategy, who is this newsletter for, what is it accomplishing, and what kind of messages need to be in here. Let's talk about newsletter elements. After you've decided what the newsletter is about, you need to start drafting the newsletter. And there's a few elements every newsletter needs. You're going to need to place the logo onto the newsletter. Now, the logo currently is blue and gray. There's a video, well, no, it's not a video, it's GIFs. I have animated GIFs. I have a document in with the logo showing how you can change the color. So you created a mood board in the last lesson. You can use those colors and apply them to the logo. So you don't have to use the blue and gray of the logo. You're welcome to go into that logo and change the colors to whatever you want based on your mood board. But you do need to, whatever you make, that logo needs to be in the newsletter. Sometimes newsletters have tables of contents. You are creating a single page front and back newsletter, so you probably will not have that. You do need a volume number, an issue number, and a date. This is the first one, so volume 1, issue 1, date. You need headlines. Under that, you need subheads, because remember, our modules need to have photo, cut line, headline, subhead, and then the article. Decks are any kind of type that sort of stands out, and let me show you an example real quick. Here, I have a deck in the last video. Ta-da! Here's a deck right here, taking a tumble above the picture. All that deck is doing is creating some visual interest. It's a big piece of bold red type, so it draws the reader in to look at the picture. So you can have decks, you don't have to. You do need cut lines if you have photos. Refers are elements that refer to other elements, so you may or may not have these. Flag, that's the name of the newsletter across the top. Jump is when you run out of room for an article on one page and you have to put a little piece of text that says continue reading on page 4, whatever it is. You should have dealt with those in 103 when you worked on your magazine. Byline, the name of the person who wrote the article. Separation or rule lines, which I talked about in the last video, and the folio or footer, which is a little strip across the bottom that tells you the page number. So let's look at an example. Here's the logo, and here's the flag. The flag in this instance is different than the company name. This is very typical that the newsletter will have a name. This is a company called DC Ranch. Their newsletter is Ranch News. So your company is Digital Medium Labs. What kind of name would be a great name for a newsletter for that company? Here's a refer that is referring to the website. So it says DC Ranch DCRanchnet.com, referring people to the website. Here's their table of contents, which again you may not need because you just have a 2-pager. If you want to do a small strip down the side like that, instead of a table of contents, you could just put little briefs, you know, in the news or meet so-and-so. You can do some simple stuff with that. Here's the headlines, which again are going to be in your display type. So here's a headline and here's the other headline. The headlines get smaller as you go down the page. So the less important modules have smaller headlines. This module is the feature. It has the biggest headline. This one, the feature or the module is smaller, so the headline's a little bit smaller. You've got cut lines under the photo. Here's a jump. Continue reading on page 14. There's a byline right there. Here is a deck. It's a little subhead they've put in the article. They put mailing info on this. You may or may not need mailing info. There's a rule line. There's the volume and issue number and date right up here under the flag, which is very typical. The volume, issue number, and date should go near the flag. Down here at the bottom, they could make this a footer, but they've had to get rid of it in order to put the mailing info. So where they have this brown line, this could easily become a footer just by putting the page number underneath it. Okay, so as you design, you're going to have to develop a design style. This design is very obviously different from other newsletters because it has neat colors that go with the ranch company. You've got brown, you've got orange, you've got certain typefaces. You need to develop a design style as well. And what you should do is use the same colors as the logo. And again, you don't have to use the blue and gray that the logo already is. You can go in and change those colors based on the mood board you did in the last lesson. But then you want to use those colors again here in the newsletter. You want to use typography that goes with the logo. So the logo has kind of like a little bit of a cutesy serif typeface. You don't want to get Comic Sans or something. It's not going to go along with that. So you want to make sure the typography looks good with the type in the logo. And then the lines, shape, type, color, and tone should match the overall look and feel of the brand. You developed that brand style in your mood board, so I should see elements of that mood board here in your newsletter. If you chose a couple typefaces in the mood board, I should see those or similar typefaces here in the newsletter. If you chose colors for the mood board, I should see those colors here in the newsletter as well. You also have to think about what's going to be in your newsletter. If you plan for a lot of photo content, then you need to think about what the photos are going to be like. What are the cut lines going to look like? If you plan for interactive video content, which you actually can do in InDesign, you probably won't do it for this assignment, but once you go out into your careers, this is something you could experiment with. You know, if you want to have interactive videos in your newsletter, you're going to have to figure out how that works. Does it have a play button? What does the play button look like? If you don't think you're going to have a lot of photos, which happens a lot, you know, you might not really have anyone to help you with the newsletter and you don't have anyone to go take photos. You need to figure out how you're going to make this look nice without photos. And pull quotes and boxes and briefs are one way of doing that, using those instead of photos. So let's just look at some examples. Here's an example, the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce. How is their design style here? Well, the logo typeface is used for the name. So here's the logo. It has an all caps sans serif with lots of spacing and it's got these blue circles under it. So the flag is called the point and it's the same exact typeface as the logo. And then it has a blue background with blue dots. So they've just taken what's in the logo and tried to use it for the flag. And then the line here, they have a big, thick black line. That mimics the typeface. If you look at the eye of the typeface, it's just a big black line. So they've put the date and the refer in a big black line. And then here, they've got a blue dot for the exclamation point that goes with it. So it's the point, exclamation point, and they put a blue dot just like the blue dots from the logo. So they're tying all of this together based on the logo. They're using the logo and they're saying, what can we use from this logo? You know, here's a nice looking logo. Let's use the typeface. Let's use the blue. Let's use the dots. So you want to do the same kind of thing. Take a look at the logo that is available to you and sort of figure out, how can I make this typeface reflected in the newsletter? When you change the color, figure out how you can make the color reflected in the newsletter. And then you can see the headlines for this newsletter are the same typeface as the logo. And then this continued on, this jump, is the same color as the circles. So this designer is just pulling a lot of the logo stuff into the newsletter. Here's another great example. This is the logo. This is the logo right here, labor, and it's got a red rose and a green line underneath it. So they've put this swoosh in that breaks up the flag at the top, and it's the same color as the logo, as the rose in the logo, and it's also round. So a flower, a rose has rounded petals, so here you have a rounded swoosh. This Michael McCarthy TD is the same typeface as the logo, so this is the same as this, it's just red, and it uses the same red as the flower. The double line right here is similar to the line. There's a line on the logo, so they've put this white line through the swoosh. And the logo is aligned right, so the line, the name, and the flower all line up on the right. So they've put right alignment under the cut lines because that's what the logo is like. One other quick thing is, whatever you do with your newsletter, this is a design style that you're going to have to continue in what you do. So for this DC Ranch, you can see how similar their website is to their newsletter. It uses the same colors, it uses the same typefaces, and it uses some of the same line elements. So here you have an orange line across the top, and the newsletter has orange lines across the table of contents. And then the colors are the same. Here's a dark brown, here's the same dark brown. Here's a light orange, here's a very similar light orange. Here's the logo on a brown background, here's the logo on a brown background. So the newsletter, you can't just think about what makes the newsletter look good, you have to think about it as being a good design style for anything. And so however you do your newsletter, when you make your website next, I'm going to expect the website to kind of look a little bit like the newsletter. This is branding, and you guys know this from your other classes. When you use that design over and over again, it creates branding. Coca-Cola can make anything red and put the word Coca-Cola on it in white, and you know it's Coca-Cola. They could probably just put a C, and you'd be like, that might be a Coke thing. They always use the exact same color red, the same typeface. Anytime you see a new Coke product, regardless of how it's designed, you know it's Coke because it has the logo and it has either red, black, or white. So you're going to need some decorative elements for your newsletter. Without decorative elements, you're going to have a really tough time making the newsletter look branded and interesting. It's going to look like a Word document and no one wants to read that. So you'll need some decorative elements, and I suggest for the decorative elements, mimicking the look and feel of the logo. So here's a logo right here, Health Economics, and it's got some O's in it. So they're bringing the O's into the decorative elements by making these circles. And then they've got sort of a line with circles going through it. This one is a great example. They've got this box on the right that's kind of boring, and this box was empty down here, so they just took this shape from the logo and put it into that box. That makes it a lot more interesting. The decorative wash that they have here mimics this logo exactly. This box here, this blue line, mimics the typeface in the name. So the circle, again, if you look at the eye, it's just a big box. So they've brought that box down here. They're pulling the color from the logo color. So the blue comes from the blue in the name. And then they've got a lot of white space here and a red bar. Again, that comes from the logo. So the logo has 3 red bars. So they've made this decorative red bar here. It's got white space in it, so they've made all this white space here. And last but not least, another example, this logo has a circle in it, so they've made these sort of curvy decorative elements that are circular in nature to mimic the circle of the logo. So I hope that was helpful. What you're going to do for your project is you're going to create a one-page front and back newsletter. I really just want you to try your best for this. I'm sure it's overwhelming. You haven't had 103 in a while, and now you're being asked to design again. And now you're designing something really specific that you haven't had to do before. I know it can feel a little overwhelming, but you just have to try your best. Ernest Hemingway once said, the first draft of anything is shit, and that's going to be the case. You're not going to make the most perfect newsletter the first time. It's okay. You need to try your best, and then me and your classmates will look at your newsletter and will give you feedback, and then you need to redo it. The worst thing you can do for this assignment is to make a newsletter, get feedback, and then just turn the same thing in again. That is not going to fly. That is not how design works. You guys will be shocked when you go out into your careers and you write a press release. In class, you write it and you're done. In the real world, you write it and your boss has to look at it, and then they give it back and you make changes. And then the lawyers have to look at it and they make changes and give it back to you, and you've got to deal with it. And then, someone in another office wants to see it. It could take you a week just to get a press release out the door because so many people have to look at it, and the final press release is going to look very little like what you started with because everyone has had their input. It's totally okay. That is how you make good work, is by getting diverse groups of people to help you improve it. So the worst thing you can do in this assignment is put a newsletter together, get feedback, do nothing with the feedback, and turn that in again. It is just not going to fly. You are going to get a real crap grade if you do that. It's very important that you make something, you try your best, and then you get feedback and you do what the feedback requires you to do. So you listen to that feedback. Your ideas are probably great, but there's other people in the class with other ideas, and hearing their ideas can help you make your ideas better. I tell people all the time, I've never done anything right the first time, any design project. I had a design project last week. I designed it, I sent it to my boss. He had like 15 things he wanted me to change. I changed them all, and then everyone loved it. I've never done anything right the first time because that's not how design works. The first draft of anything is shit. You're going to have to do it, and then you're going to have to look at it and critique it and get critiques and get other people, other eyes on it, and then try again. It's just how it goes. The reason I'm bringing this up is I don't want you to panic about getting this done for the first draft. I don't expect your first draft to be perfect, but I do expect you to put effort into it. I do expect you to make it what you want it to be. If you don't put effort, I can't help you. If you turn in a draft with no effort, you can't get any critique on it. If you turn in a blank page as a press release, you get no critique, right? So same here. If you don't try, you're not going to get a very good critique. So you do need to try your best, but it's okay if it's not perfect. I suggest that you go through the lectures and take note of the newsletter parts and the strategies for all the different elements, and then get started on your newsletter. This is very, very similar to the magazine design assignment from J103. It uses a lot of the same ideas. It's just a newsletter instead of a magazine. So do your best. You'll have a chance to get feedback from your peers and me and make changes before you get your final grade. So you get the chance to do this assignment twice. Once you turn it in, you get feedback, you have a chance to redo. I'm a big believer in that, especially in design, because that's how things get made better. So don't panic, but if you do need some help, you do have some questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be glad to help you. I look forward to seeing your first drafts and having a chance to critique them with you and seeing sort of where you go from there. So thank you for listening, and I will see you actually in a group meeting soon.